Hi, I'm Dirty Secretz, and in this series of videos, I'm going to be going over some essential house tech tips. I'm going to be going over some common techniques used in making house music, some plugins that are used quite a bit to get certain sounds, and then also some common patterns for your drums, your basses, your synths, things like that. But first off, a little bit of history on house music. Now, house music is quite a broad term with so many different subgenres, so many that it's actually hard to keep up most of the time. But house music generally has a massive pool of different sounds. Now, house music kind of started in the early 80s when two things happened. First off, there was this kind of backlash against disco music. It went underground for a while. And also around about that time, a lot of manufacturers were making these kind of cheaper style drum machines, synths and things like that. And that's this kind of fusion between those two things kind of created house music. Now, it was kind of born out of Chicago, and that's kind of where it got its name. It was a new type of music that was being played at a club called The Warehouse.
Chicago's most recent contribution to the American music scene is how it got its name. So-called house music was first made in the creators' houses, but it was also performed at clubs called The Warehouse and Powerhouse. However it got its name, it's one of the hottest things going, and as Jay Levine reports, it may only be a matter of time before house musicians become heroes in their own homes.
They started playing house music at this Michigan Avenue hotel and health club last summer, and they've been packing them in ever since. It's the first time house has escaped the South Side dance clubs or North Side juice bars for a more upscale audience, though it's still a long way from sweeping the city. But in London, house has made it to the top of the pops faster than anything since the Beatles.
All right, listen, we got a new number one. You tell them about it. Steve Still Curly.
Now, the DJs back then were Ron Hardy and Frankie Knuckles. They used to play there regularly. And actually, Frankie Knuckles kind of described house music as disco's revenge. Obviously, disco has gone underground, and this is kind of the resurgence of disco, but in kind of a new form. There were quite a lot of producers in Chicago making this style of house music and being played at this club, and technology really kind of drove that kind of sound. The producers in the area couldn't really afford those more expensive drum machines and synths, so they were kind of looking for cheaper alternatives. And at that point, for example, one bit of kit actually was on discount because it wasn't selling very well. That was the Roland 909. And this is pretty much one of the most classic sounds within house music. The kick, the clap, the hats. It really, as soon as you hear it, you know it's kind of house music. It's that kind of classic kind of sound. So a lot of kind of house music was based around that. And also a lot of other technology that kind of came around, a lot of other synths and keyboards and things like that also gave sound to a lot of other areas of house music. For example, the Korg M1. This is such a legendary keyboard synth, and some of the patches within it really kind of led to a whole load of subgenres. For example, the piano patches are just iconic. They didn't sound kind of realistic. They didn't sound like real pianos. They sounded like this kind of new style of piano, a bit more hollow, but it just worked for house music. And that kind of really spurred and kind of created this piano house kind of movement, and even like this kind of Italo house kind of sound as well. Not to mention one of the most famous organ patches of all time. That also came from the M1 as well. Show Me Love, and that bass line from that track pretty much, I wouldn't say it was the first time that patch was used, but it certainly kind of then made it popular. And honestly, the M1 organ is still used up to this day. Now, there was a whole load of other equipment at this time that kind of gave new directions to house music. For example, the Roland 303. It was this dinky little mono sequencer synthesizer, and it had this kind of squelchy kind of sound. That squelchy kind of sound gave birth to acid house. It really kind of gave it its sound, and that was kind of the basis of so many acid house tracks. And then also you had the other synths like the Junos. The Juno 106, for example, is a legendary synth, and it had this deeper kind of sound, the keys, the chords, things like that. really had this wonderful, warm kind of sound. And again, that's where kind of deep house kind of came from. It got diverted off of this main kind of house music route, and it went more of a kind of deeper kind of realm. So it was really about the technology of the time. There's lots of different synths and drum machines that kind of created that sound, and we can still hear that kind of sound today. Now, you don't need to jump on eBay to kind of get hold of these original synths. They're going to be going for quite a bit of money, and a lot of them have seen better days. But luckily, most of these synths have been replicated in plug-in form, so we can actually get hold of these, whether they're done by the original manufacturer or they're third-party ones that have been done to make sound like it. You can even get synths that are actually sampled the original synths themselves. So yeah, there's lots of different ways that we can get that kind of sound. And in the next few videos, I'm going to be kind of exploring some of those sounds and how to get them. For example, how to get those original kind of house music kind of drums, how to work with the M1 organ, for example, and a whole load of other tips to help you kind of really craft that house music sound. So in this video, we're going to go over some house music essential drums, the kind of core patterns that haven't changed since the very early days of house music: your kick, your clap, and your hat. And in fact, I'm going to be using some Roland 909 samples to build that up. So it's very much like classic house. Now, of course, you can use any VSTs that you've got. For example, Roland have their Roland Cloud subscription where you can get a recreation of that original Roland 909 as a plugin form. Or there's plenty of other different ones out there. Drumazon, for example, is a great plugin, but I'm just going to use the original samples, actually sampled from an original 909, to build up that kind of core drums. So let's start off by creating the most basic house pattern for your drums. All it needs is a kick, a clap, and a hat, and everything is then kind of expanded around that. So let's start off with just the basics. So I've got a MIDI channel here, and I'm going to put a drum rack onto it. This just allows me to kind of at least show you how the relationship between all these different sounds. You might want to split these out a bit later, or maybe have them on different channels. It's totally up to you. So let's start off by loading some drum sounds into here. Now, I could be using a plugin, for example, the Roland 909 plugin from Roland Cloud or one of the other third-party plugins, but I'm actually just going to use the samples themselves. If you Google anywhere, you'll find Roland 909 samples. And I've got a folder here full of them that have been sampled from the original kit. Now, I've got a whole load of kicks within here. There is only one kick on the Roland 909, but in this sample kit, it's been sampled in many different ways. So it's been altered in different ways. So it's been made longer, shorter, more attack, less attack. And that's why I've got so many different samples in here. So what I need to do now is I need to find a kick, a clap, and a hat. So let's find the kick to start with. This one should work quite nicely. It's a little shorter one, could work quite nicely. Then I'm going to load a clap in. There's only one clap in this sample pack. And then I need a hi-hat as well. I'm going to go for an open hi-hat with this one. This one's a good length. I'm going to use this one. Now I'm kind of putting these samples into the drum rack like this, leaving loads of empty space because I'm going to show you some other techniques in a little bit, but I want to concentrate on the basics for now, just the fundamentals. Now I have this kind of 9-bar loop going on within this arrangement here, but I'm really going to construct this pattern just over 1 bar to start with, and then maybe work on variations after that, because really that's the fundamentals. So I'm going to create a new MIDI clip over the first bar here, insert a new MIDI clip. And what I'm going to do is make sure this is on a 1/16 grid. Yep, that's fine. And then I'm going to put a kick on every beat. That's the main thing about house music. There's always a kick on every single beat. That is kind of the characteristics of house music. So I'm going to put kick here, kick here, kick here, and a kick here. I'm going to drag that out as well. So far, so simple. Next up, let's get the clap in. The clap happens every other kick. So it's the 2 and the 4. And then we want to get our hat in there. That's going to happen on the upbeat. So every time the kick hits, it's kind of in between the kicks. And that's the most simplest kind of house groove that there is, house pattern. That's kind of what house music is built on. That kind of 4/4 kick, the clap, and the hat. That's kind of what it's all built on. And then you kind of expand around there and kind of take it on a little bit further. But those are the basics. Let's look at expanding it from there, because obviously now we have doors, we can kind of layer more stuff in there. We're not just kind of limited to just having one drum machine and that's all we can kind of use. We can layer in stuff over the top. And that's kind of how house progressed. Originally, we'd have one clap, and that's kind of the whole sound of house music. But now we can kind of layer stuff. So now I'm going to add in some more claps. Now I've got some other claps that I found from other sample packs. We're going to load some of those in. I'm going to load this one into here. This is a nice little snappy one there. Load that in. I'm going to load this one in as well. Now, I don't have to use them. I'm just loading them in here to see how they sound. Let's jump back into our MIDI clip again. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start layering the claps, literally layering them up. They're going to happen at exactly the same time. But then we're going to start tweaking them to give a bit more kind of groove, a little bit more humanization. So let's layer in another clap. So I'm going to turn on the preview for now. And let's hear this one. So I'm going to put this one in here. So we can now hear there's actually two claps playing at the same time. Now, what I can do to make it a little bit more interesting is that rather than playing exactly at the same time, what I can do is offset one of them. So it makes it feel maybe a bit lazy or a bit hurried. It basically gives that kind of human feel, because if you had a room full of people that were all clapping at the same time, they're not going to be exactly at the same time. Some will be a bit quicker. Some will be a bit slower, and we're replicating that by moving the MIDI notes. So now I'm going to move this. It's going to slightly offset that second clap. You can hear that first clap just sounds that little bit different. It's got a little bit kind of a laziness to it. Now you could push it a bit further and make it really lazy. You kind of want to find that nice balance between it being a bit lazier, but not too lazy that really slows the beat down. So you can hear there, it's really starting to work. Now we can also push it in front of the other clap as well. So I can move this one a little bit left, for example, and it gives it another different effect. And also you can hear that the whole pattern now is starting to sound less repetitive, because each individual clap is slightly different. And this is a great way of kind of varying a drum pattern up from one that sounds quite basic to one that sounds quite interesting. Now let's layer another clap in there over the top of this. And what I can do with this is I could almost I could do the opposite of what I've done with the other clap. So when the other one is actually hitting later, I can hit the other one earlier. And this one I can hit a little bit later maybe. And there you can see we're really starting to evolve that clap so it sounds a little bit more interesting. Now, I want to talk a little bit about kind of mixing these in as well to make them even more, to make them sit nicely within the mix. So I'm going to hit tab, and that's going to take me over to the session view. And under this drum rack, I can hit this little arrow here, and this actually opens up all the individual channels. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all the claps. So it's these 4 here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the volume down a little bit so I can make them sit nicely within the mix. That sits a little bit better. Obviously, we're layering in 3 claps, so we're kind of just multiplying the volume of the clap. So I'm taking that down in volume a little bit. But also what I can do is I can actually space the claps out in the kind of stereo space. So I can put one a little bit to the left and one a little bit to the right. Just makes it feel a little bit more like a room almost. So they're not all in the same place. And that's kind of the basics of layering in claps, for example. Now let's focus a little bit more on the kick, because the kick, it could sound a little bit more punchier. It could stand out a bit more in the mix. Obviously, it's the original 808. And if you're going for that kind of original kind of sound, then that's great. However, if you want it to sound a little bit more beefy, to kind of fit in more with house music today, then we can start beefing it up a little bit. And to do that, I'm actually going to separate it out to its own channel. So we've got the kick within here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this onto its own channel within here, dragging it to an empty space here. This will create a brand new channel. It's actually going to separate that kick out for me. So it's actually taken the MIDI clips, the kick pattern itself, and it's also taken out the actual instrument as well. Now it's actually still within a drum rack. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ungroup it. But unfortunately, this is actually going to have a bad effect on the MIDI notes because it's actually going to play lower. Yeah, we don't want that. So I'm going to click into this clip again, and we can see it's actually on the C1 within here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all these notes, select them all. I'm going to hold down Shift, up, so I get it onto C3. C3 is the root note of the simpler, and this should now play back at the original pitch that it should be. There we go. We got our kick back to how it was before. Now let's kind of enhance it. Let's make it a little bit more interesting. So let's try layering it with another sample, make it sound a little bit more beefy. Now this is actually quite simple to do all on the same channel. Well, I've got the kick here. The kick is all just playing on its own. It's just a single simpler. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on here and go to group. This allows me to now add another sample in that gets triggered at the same time. So I'm going to open up this little panel here. And this allows me to add another chain within here. So I've got the original kick within here. I'm going to click create chain. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag and drop another kick sample within here. So let's find another kick sample within my little folder here. Got this kick. I think let's go for this one. This one's got kind of a lot of kind of upper presence, and that's what I'm going to do. I've got the low end coming from the 808, from the 909, but I think adding another kick sample over the top of it will give it that kind of crunch. So I'm actually going to put that in here, and we've now got both of them playing at the same time. Now, obviously, we don't need the bottom end coming from that new kick. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to EQ out the bottom end of that new kick within here. I'm going to place that within the chain, not after the actual group itself. I'm going to put it within this chain, so it's just affecting that top kick. And I'm going to just EQ the bottom end out. Let me just solo that so I can hear that. And let's hear them both together. I'm going to take down that top kick a little bit. I can actually adjust the volume levels. So as you can hear there, I've got this kind of little bit of crunch coming from that new sample. If I turn it off and turn it back on again, you'll hear the difference. So we've got a much houseier kind of kick now. So what else can we do to kind of really enhance this? Well, I can actually take down the length of that kick. Maybe I don't need the whole of that kick. I could actually take down the length. And in fact, let me change over to one-shot mode. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the fade out. And I'm going to take snap off as well. Just allows us to really kind of tweak that length. There we go. That makes it a whole lot more snappy. I could have it the full length if I wanted to, if I want a lazier kind of kick. Or I could just take that length in and make it a little bit snappier. As you can see, we're actually really redesigning the kick here. We're making our own kick by taking different ones and kind of layering them all together. So that's sounding a lot beefier already. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another audio effect on here. I'm actually going to add in the drum bus. The drum bus is an amazing plugin within Ableton, and it just allows us to beef up our kick. Now this out of the box already has so much added to it already. Now we can really play around with the settings in here to get it sounding how we want it to. Now, there are so many different settings and it's down to your complete taste as to what you want to do with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take the drive right down for now. Don't want that on there too much. And I'm going to add the compressor in here as well. Yeah, that really kind of pushes things together. And if your kick is really starting to feel like it's not got enough low end presence, then you can add some boom to it as well. And most of the time I adjust the decay as well because the boom tends to be quite long. So I kind of adjust the decay a little bit. Now this boom is that you can actually set the key of this boom. So at the moment it's in G0. Now, depending on what key we decide to work on a little bit later or whatever key your track is in, then you might want to set this to the key that you want. For example, let's work in D sharp, for example. What I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the frequency here so I find roughly about where D sharp would be. And then I can see that it's already there. So I'm going to click this button here. That will set it exactly to D sharp. So that just adds a little bit of boom, a little bit of low end to the kick. And we can already hear that it's really starting to sound a lot fuller. Just add a little bit more of that drive back in again. Let's say it's all personal taste. And let's hear what it sounds like with the actual rest of the claps and the hats. And in fact, I think I want to give this a little bit more of an old school kind of twist. So I'm actually going to take that hat that we got within here and I'm actually going to take it down. I'm going to pitch it down a little bit. So I'm going to go to the controls tab. I'm going to go to transpose and take it down by 1 semitone. Actually, I think 2 semitones works just nicely. So there we go. That's kind of the basic arrangement for our drums. In the next video, I'm going to go over how we can take this on and kind of add in those 16th notes to really make it more interesting.
Thanks everyone for watching. We really appreciate the support from you guys. If you liked this video, then smash that like button. And if you want to be notified about new content, hit the subscribe and the bell notifications. Peace!